I guess I don't need to, like, be really fast at starting the stream. It's probably not a necessary thing. What is necessary is doing things correctly. I think that means remembering to start small towers. Hello. Hi, Cornbread. I really appreciate the support. I appreciate you. Here in a jungle, we make games as well as play games. So Small Towers is an example of a game we have made. And, yeah. We are using this just chatting stream as a way to talk about game design because, well, I just like doing that. It's fun for me. But also, I have a strong feeling that some people may be interested to know, well, what's it like to be a game designer? What's it like to design a game? Sounds like something fun. I play games. I watch Twitch. Hey, there's this cartoon ape in a jungle. I mean, it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. It's funny. It's weird. But in terms of, like, what I would do anyway, this is it. I would love to just chat about story, art, code, and especially design. And here we are. And I mean game design. We could talk about regular design, just general design all day. But my goal with the just chatting category is to say, let's chat about game design and spend an hour each time and try to get through a critical way of thinking about games and making games so that you can make games, because anyone can do that. That's the whole point. Anyone can do this. Gosh, I sure hope the sound is working. Let me check that. Testing 1, 2. Sounds good. And so this is like, what, number 8 in the series of design chat where we're doing this thing. You know, let's build up some knowledge about what a game designer does. And that's sterile. Let's try this again. What you could do as a game designer, right? That's better. That's better. Sounds better. And we have done quite a bit already, so I'm not going to summarize it all. I'll just refer to it. And if you're like, I don't know what he's talking about, you're going to have to go back and look. Good thing is they're only an hour long each, right? Frankly, one of the reasons I need to summarize, or I don't want to summarize, is because I want it to be an hour or less. What we said was, you can do it. You can design games. And we said, you're probably freaking out now because you don't know art, code, or story. And we said, well, you don't need to know art or code or story. To make games. And you're thinking about a game like a AAA game, you're like, well, that has nothing but art, code, and story, right? I mean, of course. But I can't do any of these, so I can't design games. And I'm saying, no, you can. We said, you don't need these. And in fact, if you had them, you still wouldn't have a game. Instead, we came up with the things you need to make a game. And we said, let's just do those and prove it that you can make a game without art, code, or story. And we did them. 1, 2, 3. And we made a game. Now, it's a very simple game, but I think it's proving the point more than making the end-all be-all game. Is it a AAA game? No. Is it a console game? No. Is it a PC game? No. No. No, no, no. Is it a game anyone would pay for yet? Well, probably no. But here's the other thing we talked about. There's a process. Do this step, then that step, then this step, then this step. This is the design process that we talked about. And it turns out all design does this process. Anything can be designed using this process, including games. And more than that, you do these steps and then you start over and do them again with new insight that guarantees whatever you're designing is going to improve. The design process says, go for it, start, feel free, everything's cool. And so we did. We said, well, if these are the only things you need, and this is the process you do it, let's make a game. I said I wasn't going to summarize, and here I am summarizing. So we said, well, let's just pretend we have something that the player can control. Let's call it a square. And they can control it by moving up, down, left, right. So it's 2D, I guess. And they need to be able to win or lose, so let's just get them over here and they can get inside this square that we'll just call win. Then they win. Okay. How do they lose? We said, well, this disappears after some time, so there's a time limit. Once the time limit is up, you cannot win. But if you get there in time, you do win. There's your win and lose. Okay. Now, that's a game. Technically speaking, it fits all the elements of a game. Does it have art, code, or story? Well, we didn't make any code for it yet. We literally just said, no, we're just putting this on paper. We sketched it out like this, and here we go. But then, in our other series, Design Workshop, we are doing things with art and code. We could do things with story later, too. The point is, we actually did some pixel art. I'm going to drink some coffee. We did some pixel art. We brought it into the game engine. All this is free software, by the way. Look down below in Twitch. You'll see me tell you about the free software, and you could just use it. If you're watching this on anything but a mobile device, you have all the computing power and available software to just do it. That's what we're using. In Design Workshop, we're proving that point by making stuff, including the art. The pixel art stuff we did, including pixel animation. Cool. We did some minor code that you can do too. We did it step by step. That's in that other series called Design Workshop. We're up to, I think, Design Workshop number 8. Again, it's an hour long each or so. And we get through a lot of stuff in those 8 workshops. So here we are on Design Chat number 8. And we've graduated to a point where we said, cool, if this really is a game, and this design process guarantees improvement if we just keep doing it, and this game is sort of meh, could we just keep doing this process and make it more than that? And the answer is yes. In fact, could we do some art and code and story? And yes, we could. In other words, we kind of proved the point that you don't need to be concerned about art, code, and story skills that you may have or you may not have. We can learn them, and it is attainable, and it is accessible to you right now. And we've been proving that in this series, Design Chat, and the other one, Design Workshop. So now, we say, well, let's do it. We have some interesting things in the workshop that kind of match what we've been talking about with this simple little game idea. Could we do something that combines the efforts of both? Yes. And in Design Workshop last time, we said, let's focus on this player character for a second, because if there's something we should focus on, it's the player experience. And our player might immediately ask, who am I? And if they're staring down at 2 squares, they may not know what the heck is going on. We could turn this square into something recognizable. We designed a character and said, well, let's do some artwork to make this character look more than just a square, right? Let's give it some way to communicate and reinforce the idea that you are not just a square that can move, but when you're moving, you are moving, right? We gave some thought to the idea that if we put some eyes on this thing, eyes really communicate intelligence, they communicate character, they communicate a lot. And so we designed this character and said, let's go, right? This character already looks like it's moving in this direction. Let's go. And so we spent a little time figuring out what would those animation frames be, what would we need to do if we were able to move up, down, left, right. We have this character design, then what are we talking about? And it turned out, of course, as you go forward, you find new needs of what you're doing for the player, and you brainstorm how to address those needs, and this is the process we're talking about. It's the same process, just now we're doing it with art. Turns out it was a little more complicated than we thought. I mean, it didn't stop us at all. In fact, it told us exactly where to go. In this case, we worked on this guy. The pixel art that we do here requires that we start with a canvas that is very, very small. At 100%, he's this big. He's really tiny. Let's pump it up to like 800% or 8 times the size, and this is what we were doing. So we have a lot of frames that we made during the design workshop, and we're going to use them. In fact, I've already implemented them or imported them in the game engine for our next design workshop. And so today, what I kind of want to do is go back to the rules about how this animation will be done. Because, first of all, we did 2 kinds of animation in our workshop. One was we could have a invisible card or square in the game engine, a game object that sits there with our pixel art on it. We made a coin pixel art, and we could move it. This move of the game object is one kind of animation, but then we also said, let's change the frames of this pixel art. So it's like 3/4, and then it's like edge on, and it's the other direction 3/4, and then it's head on. And these are 4 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we could loop this, and it would kind of look like the coin is spinning. This is another kind of animation. This is pixel art animation, frame animation. Interesting to think that games often do both. The game you're seeing down below uses both, right? The characters both, move their feet like they are walking, and they move to the side. See? The arrows don't need to do much more than just rotate a little bit, but they also do move animation. So we did these mechanics in our design workshop. Move animation and pixel art animation. So when we say, yeah, we have this character, that's great. What we sorted out as we were making it was there could be different frames so that, for example, he might blink. Or she, I suppose. Our player character can blink. So like open eyes, but then blink. As soon as we did that, it suggested what color we might do and blah, blah, blah. But we hadn't even thought of color until that point, right? In fact, after the stream, I was like, oh, we could have done tone and highlight. And we could go further. Like, this is just one frame of this character as it moves, right? But we aren't doing anything with the pixel art animation, but we could. For example, if you look at my characters down below, they do shuffle their feet as they move, If you look at the characters when they're sitting still, there is some pixel art animation that they loop to show a little bob up and down. Idle animation is a thing, and our character could do that too. Our character, when they're idle, looks like this. And we could do the same thing. We could have this as a single frame, and then the next frame, it does something else. Like maybe it's up and down a little bit. Maybe it squishes and squashes a little bit. Something. Right now, we don't have that. Right now, we just have one frame for the directions that we were going. Why? Well, I mean, for now, we're just dealing with these 4 directions. We need a square to do this, and we'll get there. But the first thing we said was, could we make that better? If the player need includes being able to understand who am I, we said, well, then this is a strong enough need to tackle with some art. Putting this image in place of that square answers the question visually. We don't even need to say a word. It's good. So now, if we look at the frames we have, the control the characters, the player's going to have on the character. What we can do is look at the rules that govern the animation system. And we did talk about systems and mechanics in our previous installments. We're kind of combining both Design Chat and Design Workshop to do the same thing, which is good in some ways. And also I'm forgetting which one we detailed systems design, but I think it was Design Chat. Anyway, we have a feature that is the character animation. And this feature is otherwise known as a system because it's a collection of game rules that will be rigidly followed. That's why they're called game mechanics. Rules are game mechanics, and together a set of rules become a system. Our system, we said, well, let's just start with up, down, left, right. And then we said, oh, wait, what if they are absolutely still? They're not moving. And so immediately we began to balloon the rules of this animation system to have to include what if you are not moving. Right? If we started to list out those features, we would say, well, not moving equals idle, right? Moving meaning they haven't pressed a key. So I guess we could say if player's not pressing key, right? If no key, let's just say. No keys are being pressed, like WASD are the keys being used. But if no keys are pressed, then the character is in idle. Meaning the idle animation that we made, this frame right here, is what is going to be displayed. That's a rule. Done. So the idle frame. Okay. And so on and so forth. If D is pressed, then we have a move to the right. Right? This move to the right frame can be displayed instead. Okay, so if you're going to press D and go to the right, this is what it's going to look like. It'll change from this to this. That's the rule. So this animation system is following the rules, and so far so good, right? If we were to implement what we were just talking about, a little bit of idle animation, then this would be something a little different, right? It's still the same format of rules and mechanics that we say will work when you're trying to detail these rules. The only thing a designer can do is work on the rules, and if this format is used, you are very close to what can be implemented in code just as you write it. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. So we try to stick to this format. If some condition is true, then do some result. And this format works really well. So let's think about this. If this is idle and it's one frame, that's one thing. Here we go. We're done. But what if it is like this little idle boop, 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 and it's just 2 frames, let's just say, but like our frame animation here, it loops. So it's supposed to loop, yes, but only if no keys are pressed. So is there like a rule inside of a rule? I mean, how does that work? What is this, right? We said this is the format that works for all game mechanics, all game rules. How does this work? What we begin to learn with systems design is, yes, that format can work. And it can also be expanded and used in combination so that the ways that you use this format can offer new complex results. Okay, and it's not too complex to say, okay, you're not moving, so you're idle like this, but we would like this to animate. Even though you're not moving, this is going to loop through some pixel art to give it a little bounce or something. I mean, let's call it. We actually have blink animation. And as I was exporting the frames, I found that every single permutation of our character had a blink. Right there, we're talking about changing the frame, even though we haven't changed this rule. No keys are pressed, right? We did this frame animation by saying, well, you display a frame and then you wait a little time. And then you display a frame and you wait a little time. You go to the next frame and you wait a little time. These are stopwatches, kids. So, and then you play the last frame and you wait a little time, and then you go back to this. This was the whole rule set for this frame animation loop. And it would work exactly the same if we had this like blink as part of our idle, or if we had a more complicated idle. Now, we may not want blink, open, blink, open, blink. That would look really weird. We'd ask what's wrong with this character. But we might have, like, blink. And then this only holds for a little bit of time. This holds for much longer. Maybe 3 seconds. Maybe we change that later and we say it's 4. Or maybe we change this rule again and we say, actually, you know what? It should be between 3 and 4 seconds. So we'll hold on this blink really short, like 0.2. But, let's wait a while and let's have a random range between these two. Actually, we haven't done random in our workshop yet. That would be a fun mechanic to do. It's very common and very easy, actually. But again, this format says if no keys are pressed, then idle frame. So we have one frame. How do we make this strict format work for us, even though we're doing something more complex? Now, let's just review this complexity. If I say idle is not a single frame, that's true, because we actually have 2 frames. This represents the character is idle, not moving, right? It's still, right? We say idle is not one frame. What is it then? Well, you could think of it like a state, a condition, a result, a state of mind. Actually, a state of mind works pretty well for our purposes because he's not moving or he is moving. He's decided to move or he's not moving. The player will control this character, but really, with the way the player feels about it and the way that we can think about it is to say, this character has decided not to move. This character has decided to move to the right, etc. Right? Okay. So it's a state. It's not one frame. It's a state. It's the state that we'll just call idle. So what? I mean, how does this format work with that? Right? What is that? Well, what we're being what I'm driving you toward is a way of organizing this same format in a more complex way that is super common in games. In fact, just about every game AI, every enemy, every NPC uses this construct we're about to use as a way of doing the AI. Now, we're not doing AI here. We're just controlling the animation of this character that the player controls. So it's not, it's not an NPC. This is actually the PC, the player character. But just because they are not moving doesn't mean it's a single frame. We need to say it's a state where it could be this frame, and then it could be this frame, and then it could be this frame. Now there's only 2 frames, so it's not really that complex, right? Which helps me to explain what this is. If we are in the idle frame, that's very limiting. If we say we're in the idle state, all we did was change the word, but what we mean is this idle state now has a new set of rules. This rule here says if no keys are pressed, then go into the idle state. For the animation to display properly, we're going to say we need to know if you are not pressing any keys. And if that is true, then you are in the idle state. Well, what this does now is it says, now we can put a set of rules here that represents what to do when this character is in the idle state. Step 1, display idle, or display still. Right? This frame right here. And let's put it in the format, because like I'm trying to promote, this format works everywhere and is a good habit to get into. So let me just follow that best practice. If how does this work? Well, we were saying like this 0.2 seconds, or there's a timer. So I guess if timer is 0, or timer's not set, or let's say timer is 0. Okay. Or timer is up. Okay, because we've been working off of that vernacular when we say timer in the design workshop timer mechanic. We've been doing that. So if the timer is up, and this timer could be set to 3 or 4 seconds, or this timer could be set to 0.2, it's just a number. And guess what? We're going to say if the timer is up, display the still frame. And that is what we called this frame. Actually, still was the way we described it here. We'll display the still frame and set the timer. Now there's going to be a timer here, so we're going to need this animation feature to keep track of time for animation to make some sense, actually. But it looks like we're needing to keep track of time for this frame animation, not just this move stuff, yeah? If the timer's up, display the still frame and set the timer between 3 and 4 seconds. That's what this says. We could change this, but right now that's the rule. That's the mechanic. And so if timer is up, display the still frame. Yeah. So what does this do? Well, right now this one rule would do nothing. But wait, what about the blink? Right. Let's say this. If the timer is up, Well, I mean, I could get fancy and say if the timer is almost up, if the timer is 0.2 seconds away from being up, then we could blink. I mean, that's okay, right? We could do it that way. There's more than one way to do it. We could also say, if the timer is up and you are blinking, then display the still frame. If the timer is up and you're not blinking, then blink. We could do it that way too. Either of those would be acceptable. I'm going to just pick one. If the timer's almost up, because we already wrote this one, and I'll just... If the timer is 0.2 seconds from up, if you know what I mean by up, if the timer's like less than or equal to 0. If that's true, then display blink frame. This would do it, because if you think about, well, then what? Well, I guess included in this would be to be run timer, right? As long as you are in this state, right? If in idle, IDLE, if in idle, run the timer. That's, I guess, a good rule. If the timer's up, display the still frame. If the timer's 0.2 seconds from being up, then display the blink frame. This should be a full set of rules for one state of this character. If no key is pressed, go to the idle state, which says, now follow this set of rules. Because you're in the idle state, there's a set of rules to go follow. It's sort of like a set of rules you would use for a whole system. Is this like a sub-system? Yeah, actually. Technically, the really jargony way to talk about this is a state machine. Because it's a set of mechanics that uses states to determine which mechanics to follow. You can kind of think of it like if you're thinking about old school cars with a manual transmission, you switched gears. And you're using this gear, not that gear. Right? You're in neutral or you're in drive. Yeah. If you have no keys pressed, then in the idle state you follow these rules. There's probably some other rules that we want to do, but we don't want to follow those. We want to follow these. Well, what if I press the D key? Well, then you're not in the idle state anymore. Let's do this. If the D key is pressed, then go to the right state, which we may actually call move state or something like that, because this is not move, it's idle. But in the right state, we actually might do something similar. Truth be told, we have blink for every action. And this mechanic of blinking after a little while is probably something we want to do everywhere, right? Hey there, how are you? Say what? What's going on, Zed? I recognize your name. I thank you for stopping by. It's very cool to see you here. Do you know what we're doing? We're talking about design. Yeah, exactly. And what we're trying to prove is the idea that anyone can do this. So I'm talking through small, tiny steps in 1 hour chunks. We're about halfway through this hour. This is like the 8th one. And we're talking about rules that would govern some animation of a character we made, because, we did some frames of animation. This goofy little character has different frames that we've already made. And that's cool. This is going to be the way that we have our game engine display this frame or that. Yep, we are. Actually, there is another series. This is Design Chat, and we have another series that I call Design Workshop. And we're taking over the software development stream because, frankly, the game down below that you see is done. I don't need any code for that. The other game that we're making, I don't need any code for that one either. So I took over these two stream categories to talk about how anyone can do this. We work in Unity with C#. And we could do Unreal and Blueprint. In fact, I think we have to do that sooner or later just to show that you can do it anywhere. It's all free and it's all good. It's all good. But, yeah, just small pieces, one step at a time. The Design Workshop series has already built up things like pixel art animation, move animation, getting tools to talk to each other, etc. So in this series, we can talk like features and game mechanics and rules. This, we're actually talking about a state machine to run the animation. So if we aren't moving, for example, this idle state can go from looking like this to blink every once in a while and back to this. This is some rules we would do only if you were still. Yeah? That's awesome. What language do you work in? That's cool. I've worked a little bit in C++, enough to know that that's dangerous. I've worked with high-level programmers who do much more complicated stuff than I do. And again, I learned enough to know that I would be dangerous with that. I made a few games with it, though. You know, zombie shooter, a text adventure, a tank, top-down tank game. Ruby, cool. Yeah, nice. And Java, yeah. So Python is probably, Ruby and Python are probably the two that I haven't worked in years. But yeah, worked in Java. And that's what gave me the confidence to say, I could do this C# stuff. That's what gave me the confidence after a while to say, you know what, let me try learning C++ again. Pointers really threw me for a long time. Yeah, well, sure. And I got to be honest, being in demand and needing a job and all that stuff is not where I'm at these days. I'm living in a jungle and having fun. I'm a cartoon ape. Just making games. This is literally what we're doing here is literally what I do when I'm not getting paid. This is literally what I would do anyway, so that's awesome. Yeah, and I find that too. Like, if you know the rare stuff, you are more in demand. You can demand a higher salary. Absolutely. I have experience talking with people about what kinds of careers they might want to go into and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. See, it's fun to know about the people I meet on Twitch. It's cool. So, yeah. We are kind of goofing off because literally, my aim is to do what I normally do and just turn on stream, you know? Cool. Okay. So we are peers who diverged a little bit. We could go in, I don't want to dox either of us, but we are peers who diverged a little bit in our careers because I went into art first thinking, well, that's what I'm good at, let's go. And came back to computers because I'd been doing it forever. And, yeah, ended up designing games and blah, blah, blah. Entertainment industry, yada, yada, yada. And now I'm doing this because it's fun. That's super cool. That's fun to hear. That's super cool. Respect. Big time. And no, I'm not going to ask you for technical advice. Fix my Valorant. No, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, no kidding. It's fun to meet people and hear about stuff. Yeah, this series, Design Chat, I just yap. The other series, we go into the Unity game engine. I do a little bit art, a little bit of code, but only an hour at a time, because my whole thing is anyone can do this. If you said, oh no, I don't know art or code or story, I can't make games, I'm so, you can do this. We're starting with the idea that, like, what if it was as simple as you are a square, you're trying to get inside the win square. That's a game. Let's go from there. So now we're making it look prettier and blah, blah, blah. You get it. Yeah, I'm glad you stopped by too. You're welcome to lurk. If you do lurk, as the PSA up above says, make sure that you keep volume up. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's here, but it's also on YouTube. And yeah. Network architect. So, yes. See, this is the kind of thing. There are different people from different walks of life who are interested in game design. Artists go right on, because I'm all about art. I hear the word design, I'm thinking graphic design, and they get the wrong idea. Same thing with programmers can get the wrong idea about what it is too, especially if they have any experience working with a designer of any kind. I bet you've worked with some UI designers at some point. Just being a back-end person, I imagine that is something you've interfaced with. And you might roll your eyes a little bit, right? Again, my whole thing is like, actually, there is some myths about design. So I highly recommend you look at this series, Design Chat. We're on number 8 right now. Go look at like the first 7, because you might get some answers for questions you have about what design is. And you might find out you might like it. You might find out, oh, it's not for me. But I'll let you know in those first 7, if that makes sense. Yeah. All right. This is fun. See, this is why I do this. Okay. I got about 10 minutes. I can do this. All right. So our whole yappage up till now has been saying, like, we got this character and these frames are done and they're in the engine already. That's cool, but like, what do we do with them, right? And at first, if we just said you are a square and you can move up, down, left, right, it's not very, it doesn't answer a major question the player will have, who am I? But if I put some eyes on it and make it a fun shape and have it move around a little bit, like change shape as it moves, aha, now I'm going to identify with this almost immediately, mainly because of the eyes. And we're good to go. But is that enough? I think as soon as we bring it into, as soon as we do Design Workshop again and I put this on the square, we're going to say, oh, right, this will look dead. I mean, this is why we were already thinking about a blink. So this blink animation is not much. It's just one frame, but it will make this character come alive and make it look, not dead. So we've been saying that this format for making rules or game mechanics happen is strict for a reason. It helps us focus on how to improve our design, the system. It also is almost exactly what you can code, because in this format, you're declaring the condition necessary to do a result. That's all a programmer is going to ask for. And so both for us and for the programmer, it's helpful to list out these rules like this and just sort of paper prototype and verify, yes, that would do it. The fact that we wrote this down and said, oh, that's right, we need a timer to run, and then we added that rule, is sort of proving that this process of design, where we are free to revise and improve it, gets us there. Like, it's good. We can just start, we're safe, and we can just improve it and get there. So today's new wrinkle is to say, cool, but we have these different ways the character can be, like still, or in other words, idle, or moving. And we even have those extra things, like, don't forget we had this, what if they win, shouldn't they, express a little bit more, right? While we were drawing this character, we were like, yeah, you could, like, have them happy because they won, right? And their eyes change and their mouth changes, right? We drew this frame. This frame is there. Well, now what? Right? Careful what you wish for, because now we have to make this work with our system, you see. It's not going to stop us. We just need to go through the process and figure it out. So if no key is pressed, then we're in the idle state. Well, this is part of the idle state, isn't it? Yes, it is. There is this blink, and there's this open eye, neutral face. Sure, that's in the idle state, but so is this. In fact, so is if you lose. We made this frame too, right? We made that frame. So if you win or lose, the character is helping you say that, right? Right. Need an emotion state. Pretty much. That would be, there's more than one way to do it, right? But what I'm going to say is we can absolutely rely on emotion to only happen in idle, and therefore let's fold these emotions into the idle state and leave moving for moving, because this is how it goes. This game is super simple. You're a square, and you can move it into the win square. The win square is going to shrink, and so there's a limited amount of time to win, otherwise you lose. Done. That's kind of it. But to make it more personable, we're saying here's a character. So yeah, we could say you're doing emotion, but really the only time we care about the emotion, most of the time, is this sort of neutral smile, whether you're moving or not. But the only time you're going to do like happy or sad is if you actually won or you lost. And those we would just throw you in the idle state and do the emotion. Hey, did I just say a rule? Yes, I did. If you win or lose, then we need to do two things. First, no more control. The player cannot control the character anymore. And idle state. That way we can just put the rules for happy or sad inside idle and call it done. But this was necessary. Like, what if the player does move around after they won? I mean, I guess we could, there's more than one way to do it. But I'm thinking we just put these frames together that look happy and sad, and it's definitely oriented for this shape, which is idle. So we're going to make this rule. We're going to assert that rule. Now we're going to fold this in here. I think this is going to work. So we're in the idle state. We're going to run a timer. In fact, we have blink for happy and sad as well, so it's not going to be a problem. In other words, this can just keep going. But what we might need to do is implied in the rule is something we need to remember, and we talk about this in the workshop. Your scripts are going to do two things. Your code is going to do two things. It's going to remember stuff, and it's going to do stuff. And I think Zed would agree. Another way to describe programming is you are manipulating memory. Memory and remembering stuff is like half the battle. In our case, there is something implied in this rule. If you win or lose, go to the idle state. This is fine the way it is. No more control. Okay, that's fine the way it is. We can see what we do, but implied in there is what we remember. First of all, our player movement system, our player control system, actually pressing W or S or A or D, to move is going to be suppressed. In order to say no more control, what's implied in there is that this system will have a way to disable. We will say, you can't move anymore. So we're going to say you can remember or have a variable that says whether or not you can move right now. We're going to have that. We'll do that later when we do the other feature. We're working on the animation feature right now. But that's what's sort of implied that we should remember in this rule. We should also recognize that we're going to remember, in a way, whether we won or lost. We need to signal, in a way, signal this idle state whether we won or lost, because, first of all, the mouth is going to change, and the eyes are going to change. Whoops. We could, I think we already have separate layers for the eyes, the mouth in our GIMP file here, but I have exported them as individual frames. In other words, there is a happy frame, and there's a happy frame with a blink. So we're going to do something like these rules that we've already done, but it's not going to be displaying this display still frame, because that implies this still frame with a neutral expression. Okay? We're going to be displaying the still frame with the happy expression, or the still frame with the sad expression. Now, that said, it still blinks. And it's actually not that bad. Not far off at all. What it means is this rule has an extra piece to it that we haven't included yet, which is the piece of emotion that we are going to remember. Instead of a separate state, it's just a variable, but yeah, the emo. We need to know if this is neutral, or happy, or sad. And we only turn happy or sad. We only turn happy or sad based on win or lose. Otherwise, it starts out neutral and stays there until we win or lose. But the blink and the still frame are both based on which emotion they are. One of three emotions, neutral, or happy, or sad. The blink is still part of it. So, this format, I assert that this format of if condition is true, then do a result. This format is the best way to think about your game rules, which is the only thing game designers have to work with, basically. It's the best way to think about it to find opportunity and also find details and things you've missed. And like we just added emo here, and we added the the idle timer. This is the best way to think about how you can find opportunity and solve problems in your rule sets. It's also almost directly what we're going to code when we get into the engine. And what we talked about today was, hey, we got these frames and it's going to be fun. Now, how do we implement them? And what I meant was, what are the rules that implement them? And what we already started saying was, well, instead of a single frame, let's call it a state. And as soon as we said that, we implied that there's a new set of rules that we only pay attention to when we're in that state, a state machine. This state machine pattern is used all the time in games. Like I said, it's pretty much every single piece of game AI you've ever seen. And it is so common, it was worth talking about today in rule form, and then we will implement it in the design workshop. Because we will say, okay, there's going to be a way to remember which state we're in. In this case, we're thinking idle is one of them. And we're going to say, if you're in the idle state, notice that's the same pattern. If condition is true, then result. The result is then, if you're in the idle state, only follow these rules. Ignore the other rules for the other states. And we're still in that same strict format for defining your game mechanics or game rules. So we'll do that next time. We'll figure out a way to remember which state we're in. This is the rule to go into the state. This is the rule to get out of that state and go to a different state. In fact, this is how I describe what a state machine is. It's a list of rules for each state that you can be in. The only other piece to that is there are extra rules that define when you go from one state to another. And that pretty much describes how a state machine works. And if you think of it in terms of like game AI that you've run into before, it starts to make sense. I'm sneaking around a castle. I'm a thief. And there's a guard. And they're on patrol. Yeah, translations, exactly. And I made a noise. I'm trying to sneak, but I made a noise. The guard is on patrol, and they heard me, and they go, "Who's there?" And they walk over to closer to where I am, but I go quiet again. And the guard is there, and I, like all game players would do, wait a few seconds, and the guard says, "Oh, I guess it was nothing," and goes back to patrol. We've all been there. We've all seen that. And that is a state machine. This guard was in the state of patrol, where that set of rules is something like this. Okay, I'm going to go to my next patrol point. I'm going to wait a minute, and I'm going to go to my next patrol point. When I get back to the first, or when I go to the end of the patrol points, I'll go back to the first one. Done. That's the patrol state. If I hear any noise, go to another state. Go to the alert state, for example. In the alert state, ignore the patrol. Go to where you heard the noise. Say who's there, but also wait a lot longer. Wait 3 seconds or whatever it is, right? After the 3 seconds, go back to patrol. Also would be implied like if you see a player, then go into another state called like attack, right? We've seen this play out tons of times. In fact, you could look at boss battles. You could look at any NPC interaction. You could look at any of those. I guarantee you, 99% of them are state machines. And you could really think of it like changing your mind. The character of the guard on the castle wall changed his mind from patrol to go alert and see if you can find where that noise came from. After a while, they changed their mind and went back to patrol. If they saw you, they'd change their mind and attack you. Right? State machines are absolutely used in animation like what we're talking about today. But the way that most of us encounter it is with AI. And you start to think like, wait a minute, isn't AI like that magical voodoo something with like special chips or something crazy and blah, blah. It's like, no, that's called marketing hype. Another favorite thing I love to do is dispel the myths of what AI is and tell you it's actually just more if-then statements, but in more complicated structures. One of those is called a state machine. And it works really well, so well that most games use it. All right, I'm going to ramble for a while. But the point is, we have these frames, and this system that we're talking about for the animation will at least give us the life that we were looking at for with like the blinks and the expression for win and lose. If we did nothing more than implement the kind of blinking for moving to the right, moving to the left, moving up and down, which we have those frames too. There's moving to the right. then we're good. Like, we're ready to go into the workshop installment, the next installment of that. And with these frames already imported, build this little system out of a tool that will manage a state machine. We'll follow this set of rules, which will lead to other sets of rules, one for each state. Fun. I'm telling you, I do this anyway. This is the stuff I would do anyway. The game you see down below, we made in 6 weeks. It's called Small Towers. It's not for the bots. The bots are just showing it off. It's for chat. And it's run with chat commands and blah, 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 and yada, yada. The idea is this was a game that I said, you know what, I'm not going to finish the other game, Shuffle Wars, this year, so I better stop and make this one. This is, I mean, I get the itch to make new games around this time of year anyway. This is kind of what I would do anyway. The other game we're making, Shuffle Wars, is a battle card game. And I wanted to try a different way of working that I have completely rejected in the past. But I said, you know, I've never actually tried it that way, so I guess I should try it first. And now I'm convinced, yeah, it's garbage. It's not garbage. There's some positives to it, but I definitely won't do that again. I will instead learn the lessons from it and have a more informed opinion about why I won't work that way again. It's okay, though. Hey, at least all the code is done for that game. Now we're just doing art. And other things, audio, things like that. So, thank you for stopping by, Zed. Appreciate it. It's fun. It's fun to talk with people who are interested in these kinds of things. And if you're interested in these kinds of things, come on by, follow, like, subscribe, retweet. Thank you. Have a good evening yourself. Happy holidays. And when you do show up, please use Command Tie. Command Tie lets me know you're here. And I can say you're here, like Zed. And until then, have fun. Do well. Be good. Stay safe. Happy holidays. See ya.